Ken, I forgot to turn the microphone on.
That would help.
I didn't want to hear all the grunts and groans and all the other, associated noises I was making when I was getting ready, bumping around back here. So I clipped off the microphone. Now back on. Okay, guys, one more try. Ken's on the phone with me, so he'll try to wingman me over the telephone. So, Ken, one more voice check.
Voice check. Voice check. Trying not to be obnoxious.
Phew, that's going to be an effort. Okay, so you'll have to read the comment there. I got my computer glasses on. If I try to read, I still got paint on my arm from working on the pibber.
Somebody wants a box with sign language. Silence.
I turned on the microphone.
That's better.
All right. Okay, excellent. And this lag doesn't help, but oh well. So, as I was saying, first off, thanks to Orange Tabby for this magnificent t-shirt. And now, just to jump right into things, let me show you how I spent part of the day. Let's see, where's the Mach 2 Fear backboard? You notice my magnificent set dressing behind me. Well, I found this in the garage today. This is the board, the project board I use for making a lot of my videos and stuff, like the Exodus video and the Godzilla to Wehrmacht. So I just decided to use the back of it, which didn't have anything on it, and spent the day gluing it all together because I was that Pedovan wasn't big enough, so this way I can people can move around behind me completely out of view. You can't see anything. The only gaps down here. But I've got this model which we're going to be talking about in a little while. By the way, before I forget, Claire. Is Claire here? I need to thank Claire for this that just showed up today. I was going to do an unboxing, but I figured I would just have the model ready, make it a little bit easier on everybody. So Claire up in Canada sent that to me, and we're going to talk about this a little bit because some interesting stuff about that. So thank you, Claire. Is Claire on board? Well, Ken. Anyway. I will see Claire if he comes on later. We'll thank him again. That's wonderful. So, okay. First off, just get a few of the housekeeping-ish chores out of the way. My apparently I was invited to a podcast on IQ podcast. It's a but I had mentioned it before that that was going to be at the end of this week, but the other guest had to actually got a Hollywood gig and had to go to work, so it'll probably be in June. Excuse me. Okay. Thought I'd get... Monica was right. I should have had that hot tea before I came on air. Anywho, also, the Pibber is mostly done. I still have to do the crew members, but I did take some photos of it today. And I mixed we're going to talk about mixing paints here in a little bit, but I mixed my own olive drab for the little, what do you call that thing, Ken? That little canopy. It's got a name. You're a boat guy. It's canopies they put over the center of boats.
The bimini top?
Bimini, that's it. Yeah. I don't know if the military calls it a bimini top, but I mixed my own paint to do the bimini top. But this is a Tamiya kit. It's 135 scale. It's a typical excellent Tamiya quality. Look, if I can make it look this good, anybody can. It's really just a great kit. Ooh, and now that I see it all magnified on the camera, I see a few little shiny glue spots. Got to go hit it with some more dull coat. But it's on the shelf, and it looks great with the PT boat and everything. And
Really nice.
Thanks. Just a little yellow and green. It was a glue trooper. It actually said, it had mentioned yesterday when I was talking about the different shades of olive drab, because there's so many of them. That's one of the colors we'll talk about. So just, it's just green and yellow. And so I just mixed it till I got what I was happy with. And of course, they're both Tamiya acrylics. It's about 3 coats because I kept shading it. I never was quite happy to shade till I got it about where I liked it. And the radar on top, I noticed that it was a slightly off green. So I used some Tamiya lacquer on that out of a spray can, but it looks real good. I don't have a complaint about the kit. Any blemishes or mistakes are all on me. Just read the instructions thoroughly, like with any kit, because there were a couple of things I didn't catch after I'd gotten going. A lot of little, as you would expect with a boat, a lot of little bits and bobs. But I'm going to come back probably eventually at some point when I get the crew finished and weather it some, because right now it looks like it just rolled out the factory floor. But even comes a little that string, that rope for the anchor on the bow. And the only thing I added that wasn't in the kit was the rigging, and there's not very much of that. It's up forward of the bimini top. But great, fantastic kit. I cannot get, it's 5 stars, and really don't have anything bad to say about it. So, Charlie don't surf. I was waiting for all the Apocalypse Now references. Chef, don't leave the boat. I've been getting a few of them lately. So, sorry for fight. And by the way, Robert Duvall played Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore. Did you know that Duvall's brother actually was a general in the Army?
What was that part? You
I'm sorry, that Robert Duvall's brother actually was a general in the Army. He passed some years ago. One of my friends in the old guard actually did the ceremony, I think. But anywho, so paints. This is unfortunately what the paint rack over at Hurricane looks like today. They have a lot of stuff on order. They're having, obviously there's some supply chain issues, but they're being promised they'll be coming in. And I was wondering if any of you guys have been having trouble getting paints. I got black out there, this upper left's completely devoid of any black paint. But it's just, it seems like there's these people are promising, we'll have the stuff to you next week, and next week turns into 2 weeks and 3 weeks, and these poor hobby shops, and the like are struggling. My guess is the big box stores or whoever orders this stuff in bulk is getting the first dibs. But anyway, they're working hard, and I'm just wondering if how many of you guys are having trouble finding paint. And but Ian's got more on the way. He ordered it a while back, so as soon as it gets there. But and the Michaels and places don't seem to be doing that much better.
One of the guys is asking if about techniques for unwarping wings and things like that.
Okay, I actually had to do this on that Convair 880, that Pegaso kit. The wings look like potato chips, and apparently, if you want to take a heat gun or even a hair dryer and heat the plastic up. Some people say to boil it in warm to hot water and it gets pliable. I think a heat gun might be a little bit better. But
what about hot water?
Well, I was saying some people boil it in hot water to get it soft, but I have never tried that. I've never tried it. Ken, you got something making racket in the background. Ken. Okay, I'm going to take you off speaker. There's something making a bunch of racket in the background. That wasn't a chewing sound. It was mechanical.
Oh.
Anyway, there it goes again.
That's the headphone moving when I chew.
Well, stop chewing. Just because you're off camera doesn't mean you can snack during the show. Now read a couple of the comments. I'm taking you off the speaker then. God, it sounds like you're sending Morse code. So anyway, you could boil it. Some people I've heard of people doing that. Just hot tap water, no boiling. I'm sorry, correct. Not boil, blah, 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 but just get hot tap water. And some people like to use the heat gun because you can get a specific area. And apparently that's the best way. Then you got to take it out and shape it and let it cool. I wound up just twisting and flexing it, and it got straight enough. The kit wasn't something I was going to get down in the weeds with because it's about an 8-piece kit. And it's a Bondo Queen. But I will be taking my time. Now that I finished the Pibber, and I only did the Pibber because I'd had it on the table for a while. I'd tried to get it done before the watercraft build, but just didn't get around to it. And poor time management on my part. But it's done. But it's a Tamiya kit, and I wanted to get it done because I love building Tamiya kits because they're Tamiya kits. Everything fits usually. So now I've got those two Heracles and Bruce, the Mystic Modeler, who hopefully I'm going to get to see on Thursday. He's just down in Daytona. Is Bruce here? Anyway, so he had warned me though that go ahead and build the model before you paint. Apparently he pre-painted everything and it made things more difficult. So note to self. Now I was going to do two of them in airline markings, but I'm not sure I have the correct markings for the second airplane. So what I might do is, I didn't realize those HP 42s and 45s were also commandeered by the Royal Air Force during the war. And there's a couple of artist conceptions of them in military markings. I think it looks pretty cool in RAF yellow and camo. So I might do one of them military markings and one of them in airline markings. But okay, hold on. You're back on speaker.
Okay. Somebody came up with a really cool thought here that I thought was pretty good. After you dip it in is to get it to the shape that you want. Then stick it in ice water so you don't have to sit there and hold hot plastic and get it to
flash freeze. It's like a horseshoe, man. We bend that thing, get it warmed up, bend and I'm a plastic smith. Well, let's see. If a guy who bangs away on iron is an iron or blacksmith, then I guess plastic comes in all kinds of colors. I'm a greensmith or yellowsmith or whatever. Careful on the Heracles kit. Instructions are lacking bit. So I understand. I'll have to... Well, I was sent 2 of them, so I can always learn on this. Oh, well, correct my mistakes I made on the first one. And if the mistakes are bad enough, no one in the world will never see it. It's for the best. Which brings up a question that Steve had submitted to me, which I thought was a great idea. It being Easter and all. Have you guys ever had a kit that you rose from the dead? And, boy, half of my builds end up in the coffin. I have to bring them back from the brink. Self-inflicted injuries. But I can think of a few kits that literally came back from the dead. And I don't mean as kit bashes. I mean, stripped them, resalvaged them, or maybe completely tore them, undid them and redid them. It's like that skit a few people have sent me, that Fry and Laurie skit where he goes to the hobby shop. The guy the crazy clerk tries to sell him the BF-109 that's already built and convince him that the artistry is in disassembling it and stripping the paint. But actually that's not entirely off, because I've had to do that with a few kits. So there actually is some artistry to being able to strip a kit down and make it where it's salvageable. I mean, not tearing parts off, but I've done that to a few kits, and there were a couple of them I wasn't able to get them to come apart the way I didn't use a debonder, or at least I didn't have the proper kind. And I wasn't able to get them for the life of me. I can't remember what they were, but I can remember fighting with the styrene. And wow, that glue bond really held. And resorting to cutting, but then rebuilding, repainting, and rebuilding the kit. My brother's kits, that at the F-105 and the Mosquito, they've been hanging in the room for 30 years. So they caked in dust and everything. So I washed them, I got them cleaned up. And I didn't really, the F-104, I did. I actually removed the landing gear off of it, put the gear up, stripped it, and completely repainted it. And the other ones, I forgot that F-104 is an old house survivor also. I always talk about the the Mosquito and the F-105 being the survivors. I forgot the F-104 was one, but I got all new decals for it. And it was, oh gosh, I forget what it was, a Hasegawa kit but it was so much better than the old Hawk kit. Because I had one of those. The Hawk kit didn't have the spike on the nose, didn't have much detail, didn't have a pilot figure or anything. It was one of the old ones, really basic. But anyway, the point is that I rehabilitated those kits and cleaned them up and repainted them. But except for taking the gears off and folding the bays and patching up some of the bombs, I didn't really have to rebuild them. But they weren't necessarily resurrected from the dead, but they were on life support. Models just fall apart just sitting there on the shelf, especially if they don't have a cover over them. Just the dust eventually, can develop acids and stuff, and paint and decals literally rust. And then you have, when you're dealing with enamel paints, you're talking about basically acids. And when you try to strip those off, you often lose the finish on it because it had bitten into the paint. So that's why I think a lot of people, if they're going to do that, they use Mr. Surfacer to sort of, give it its, fill the gaps for all practical purposes. But that's a tough thing to do. I actually had some problems when I did that big G scale locomotive for you. I tried to repaint the fuel tanks, and the enamel had already bitten into the plastic when I did it, I had this uneven surface because there was a big area where some of the paint came off clean. I guess it hadn't completely dried, and some of it was like, nope, we're not going anywhere. And I was like, well, nice thing about black, blemishes like that don't show so well, and a locomotive's industrial equipment, so people expect blemishes.
Yeah, that was my engine that he painted for me, and he said, well, just pretend like it's paint that chipped off, and they painted it back over it again.
Mm-hmm. It's not a mistake if you can explain it away. It's a feature, not a bug. It's authenticity. You know those things rust, right? You know, they sandblast them and, oh, look.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Half the art is convincing the judge how to cover up your mistake. Oh, there was one thing I wanted to mention, and this was pointed out to me. I didn't have a chance to do much research, but I was at the hobby shop. This is that $43 Kefir. And as a couple of folks pointed out to me, that is a limited run from an anime series called Area 88, and they also have the Saab Draken up there. You notice there's no nationality markings on it. And the apparent, you know, just like Girls in Panzer and a couple of others, the Japanese have these interesting anime series. And they got one of them where little girls are flying fighter jets, and why not? They got girls driving tanks and living on 5-mile-long aircraft carriers. So, okay, I'll go with it. You know, people go, well, that's totally laughable. You know, I'm like, wait a minute, you watch Godzilla movies. Yeah, so. Anyway, that was why this was so expensive, is that apparently it's a limited edition. I mean, obviously they're trying to use an existing kit to fabricate value. This is the exact same kit that you can get on eBay for $5 to $15. It just has different decals in a different box. And that's it. Other than that, I'm sure it's the exact same kit. But, you know, this makes it official anime canon, so there you have it. You know, so that's the reason that costs so much. That, and it's a Hasegawa kit. Hasegawas have a propensity to be expensive. You are paying for the Chuck's right. You are paying for the license. That's why Star Wars kits cost so much. He's got a little B-wing fighter there that was a $3 kit, which would be about $12 today. They want it's also about $40 or $35 or something. So licensing costs money, and the sizzling of a lit fuse to how many models? The last thing they heard was a burning firecracker fuse. But, well, at least I don't feel quite as bad about that thing being that expensive, even though we all realize they're just sort of trying to fabricate value. But, you know, at least there's a little something there.
Here's a good question for you, Max.
Yeah.
Ask the troopers if they ever blew up a model.
I think you're going to get a lot of yeses here. Because I know I certainly did. I had an 8mm camera. I wish I had the footage. I'd love to torch them, blow them up. You know, they burn much better if you douse them with a little gas first. Yeah, we survived the 70s. Firecrackers, gasoline, mini bikes, bicycles without helmets.
Model rocket engines.
I come from oh yeah, there's that. And don't forget, we used to make our we didn't have money for solar igniters, so we would get the wire out of the bread twisty, strip all the paper off and get the wire, and then wrap it around match heads and wedge that up in there, because nothing ever went wrong with that.
Ooh.
And yes, Ken, apparently quite a few people have given the models the gunpowder salute. No, you never blew one up.
People really said that they've done that. Maybe they're all just laughing too hard.
I have also done the BB gun thing. Hey. Except that I can't bring myself to destroy a perfectly good kid. I had considered taking him out to the rifle range when we went out there.
I did have...
drinking from a garden hose, yes.
One of friends who he came... I had him on a railroad layout in the basement. And apparently one of my brother's friends thought it would be funny to start shooting at my trains with a BB gun.
Yeah, there's always one. Well, I did that to my brother's model. And, honey, he didn't think it was very funny. He worked real hard on that F-14. Oh, come on. We saw Top Gun. It survived.
It's called battle damage.
Yeah. Yeah, M80s. The only problem with M80s is shrapnel. I mean, you got to get away from those things. I mean, trust me. M80s can do a number. But the match heads gone by, yeah.
Darn yes, I did.
Well, you know, one of the problems, because I used to make blood stuff, I used to make home movies as kids and everything, and one of the things I even realized as a kid is that water and fire don't scale. You know, you just can't get an authentic explosion on a 1/72nd scale model. Now, I did have a 124 scale ME109 and some gasoline, and that actually looked pretty believable. Of course, we had to dump the gas on it, but, you know, as the fire was going, you know, and, hey, we almost got completely out of the way of the blast. Also, models explode too fast. You need a camera that can overcrank so you can slow it down. Okay, so we all blew up models. We all drank out of water hoses. We all rode bicycles without helmets. Quick amen if you ever rode in the back of a pickup truck with absolutely no safety gear, because that's how we went to school. And we were glad to have the ride. And,
can I tell a story about the match head things?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. When I was in high school, my brother and we discovered something called a pocket rocket, which is basically...
Hey, this is a family-safe channel.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not kidding. This is what it was called. It was called a pocket rocket.
All right.
What you do is you take a few match heads, and then you take some tin foil, and you'd wrap it around it, and then you take a pin, and you would stick it up to make a little hole, and then you would bend a little paper clip, put the little match thing on there, and you would light another match, put it underneath there, and eventually it would ignite the match heads inside the tin foil, and it would take off, and it would fly like 2, 3, I don't know, sometimes maybe 4 feet. And my brother, Wayne, just thought this was the coolest thing. And for some reason, I don't know what possessed him, but one day in class, while we were watching the film strip, you remember those things?
Wait a minute. You made these, or they were something you bought?
You made these.
Oh, wait a minute. I think, is that also called a matchstick rocket?
Probably. It sounds about the same thing. Anyway,
okay.
So we're in the dark watching this stupid film strip. I have no idea what it was, but my brother decided that he would light one of these things off in the dark in the class while the film strip was going on. And the teacher's like, "What was that?" And my brother's over there trying to blow the smoke away before the teacher can get the light turned on.
Hang on, guys. I might have a visual aid to help with this, and it would look something like that. Is that what we're talking about? Your instruments of destruction?
Sorry. It'll show up in a second.
Yeah, it's like an 8-second lag here. Yeah, I'm actually talking to you faster than I'm talking to them because you and I are on the phone, but they have to go through the lag. You should have it now.
Somebody said they made them.
Yeah. But does that look familiar?
That's the start of it, yeah.
Yeah, he's got another picture of it wrapped up. So you would just wrap this thing up with the match head. I think I remember doing this. How did you light it off, though?
By the way, disclosure here, we don't recommend anybody doing this.
Yes, we do. I said it. Go out and do it right now. Unless you're in America.
We made those in junior high. Somebody said John Jones.
So I know you wrap the head in the foil, but how do you light it off?
You just take a match and you put it underneath the head, and eventually it gets it hot enough that it ignites. So
the teacher didn't notice a guy striking matches. But of course, this is probably back in the day when you smoked in school. I remember my high school having a smoking area.
Like I said, Wayne didn't usually do stuff like that. I don't know what possessed him to do that in class. He got away with it.
Oh, Lord. We had a good time. So I had mentioned earlier, so I'm still waiting to see if anybody has resurrected any models. I haven't been reading the comment stream. Just switch glasses here. You're supposed to be wingman of me, Ken. Read. Tell me important stuff.
So they said tinfoil was too heavy, so they used chewing gum foil. I think that would have burned through it too fast.
Well, not if you hold it the right distance. We shall have to do research.
Then we really started experimenting. take 2 or 3 match heads, and, cut the stick off and just stick them all together inside there.
Well, it's like, women think, men, they never grow. Some women mistakenly go, as men get older, they act more like children. But the wiser women understand, no, because they never grew up to begin with. That's right. Adulthood is overrated, or as the kids like to say today, adulting. So, by the way, you guys probably already familiar with this because I talked about it on the video yesterday, but I just want to say thanks to Steve Leto for taking time to talk with me, and that was over at Leto's Law. He took quite a bit of time answering my questions and chatting back and forth on the texting machine, but now I got to go get his other books because I found that book. And by the way, Mr. Irick, I want to thank you for the Turban Car book. That was a good read, and so now I got to go get his books on the Dodge Daytona, and the Super Bee, and the Tucker. It's funny. I love aviation history. Everybody knows I'm an airplane geek, but I've always liked cars. But I enjoy reading about car history and industrial history in general. I think a lot of people build models do because all of us are kind of a combination artist on one hand, industrialist in the other, and that would explain why the bulk of our modeling is machinery. But so just checking here. Maybe come on with lipo matches. What match gives the best propulsive force? Well, personally, I like Matchbox, but
somebody suggested marine matches.
Are those a strike anywhere jobs?
I don't know. I'm not familiar with them.
Well, I spent so much time getting this thing back today, I didn't have any chance to get any real visual aids put together for the video. But this is going to stay in the garage, so when I do these things, I can roll it in. It's on a set of wheels. Well, there is something to talk about now. So, we'll switch to that model that Claire sent me. Let me get the picture up here. Okay. Oh, there it is. Now, you guys may remember I had a Mach 2 kit a while back, and I was not impressed. Well, Claire sent me this big 1/72 scale Avro York. And hopefully, I heard that Mach 2 had gotten, pardon the pun, but it cleaned up their game. They'd gotten a lot better. And I'll be able to tell once I get started on this. But I have the kit right here. And I didn't have time to spread out and take photos, so I guess we'll just take a look at it in real time. But there was something kind of interesting about the box. So, let me just whip this out here. What did I just say about this being a family channel? All right, let me turn that picture off. Okay, here it is. Now you will notice, I'm going to lift the lid off, that it has paper on it. And apparently there was a Seamaster underneath it. Now, I don't know if this was something that was done at the factory or if it was done by a subsequent owner, but the York is inside, so it's the correct airplane. But I was wondering, I know Mach 2 is a small company, I was wondering if maybe they just had one box printed up for one model, and then they just print these covers, because it's pretty generic, just says, plastic scale model there, and yeah, there's nothing anywhere that would indicate what's in the box other than these papers. So that would actually be a clever little idea, because that way they could just have one box printed, and then when somebody orders a different model, they just use the same box and just glue that paper on it, which is kind of a neat little trick. So there's a letter here. Hi, Max. Here is a Mach 2 challenge for you. The fit of the two fuselage has left a lot to be desired. Looks like I got my work cut out for me. I would have made sure they were true first by sanding them on a flat surface, then seeing if they fit better. The plastic feels more like a resin than a plastic, but the thing requires some sanding off the ridges on the fuselage. For the wings, I probably would have shortened a pair from an Airfix Lancaster, but that was down the road. Best wishes to you, Mrs. Max's Models and Honey. Well, thank you, Claire. I appreciate that immensely. And some color diagrams, and this is a says Berlin airlift.
Second billing.
What?
The cat got second billing.
I told you she's the most popular one on this channel, and don't think she doesn't know it. She has become quite the diva. Yeah. Okay. That's absolutely true. This does have a resiny feel to it, and not as much flash as the last one. Although this does look better than the other one. But oh boy, I spoke too soon. I don't know. But I don't think you guys are gonna be able to see this on the well, maybe you can. Look how high up those. Knockout pin stick. I was doing a lot of work on this, and but you know, not too many people making 1/72 scale kits of the York. This is going to be one of those projects that is over on the bench, and I work on it when I feel like it and do other stuff, because that little Ryan X13 was a handful, and it wasn't that big. Something this big. If I try to work through this at one time, I'll drive myself bonkers just cleaning stuff up. In fact, what I'll probably do is remove all the parts and just clean them up before I even start on the model. Because I don't know about you guys, but I hate breaking my stride. Like, I'm the kind of guy that likes, once he knows where the parts go and he's working on a section, I like to clip all the parts off and have them laid out, so when it comes time to glue them in, I hate going back and forth to the sprue, which ironically is what I usually end up doing, but I actually prefer to have it done ahead of time, because a lot of times I'm afraid I'm going to get the wrong, like, oh, which part was this? Especially with the Gundam. Gundams, I take them off as I go, because they're such oddball shapes and everything. And it's virtually impossible to tell where something goes. Okay, let's take a look at these sides he's talking about. His black shirt's going to come in handy. You're not kidding. Okay, guys. Let me use this. That. I got the midsection together. If I put the nose together, and oh, it's not even close to fitting. I'm going to invent a new phrase. This will be a cuss kit.
A what kit?
A cuss kit. Okay. I am not joking here, guys. That's the gap. Okay, let's fucking banana this thing together. That one's a little curved. Why, Mach 2, you outdo yourself.
Apparently this Mach 2 has a reputation for being a challenge.
Woohoo! I can actually see the curve on it.
That's a little bit. I think that model warping technique we were talking about earlier might come in real handy.
I think this is beyond that. Plus, this kind of resiny material they use, I'm not sure it would work on it.
Somebody said, "Run, Max, run."
Hey, Ken. Next time you come up, bring some M80s.
Ooh, I don't have any, but I'll see if I can find something.
That's okay. We got reloading supplies.
Hey, we're coming up on the July 4th. There ought to be some stuff coming out pretty soon.
And nothing like shooting up a British airplane on July 4th, right? I'm sorry. What is it the Queen calls it? Happy Trader's Day?
Nothing wrong with that.
Well, I'm going to put this letter here with the letters.
Oh, do you remember from that movie, Space, I think it was Spaceballs?
He went to Plaid!
Oh, what was... Anyway.
The one line everybody remembers from Spaceballs is ludicrous speed.
The alien spaceship couldn't get off the ground because it had to get into orbit. It was going to blow up and take out the universe. So the old guy came out with a couple of sticks.
Oh, no. That was Spaced Invaders.
Spaced Invaders, that's right.
I love that movie. Hey, where do you guys keep your wrench mullers?
Yeah, this is guaranteed to improve the aerodynamics of an alien spaceship.
I love that movie. Some mysterious thing came back to Captain Bip to his doom.
Oh, that was a great movie. Oh yeah. The one day I don't know why, I just got in the mood. Say, I gotta watch that movie, and I went and found it on YouTube.
Yeah, it's a cute little flick, and
one of the funniest, well, I wouldn't say funny, but one of the more interesting lines I thought was that towards the end of the movie, when the old guy is sitting there on the porch with his dog, he said, "Why do we have to go and get old?"
Yeah, I'm starting to say, as old Royal Dano, I'm starting to sympathize with him. I honestly, I'm going to have to try the unwarping, but I honestly don't think that thing's warped. It actually, I think that Claire's right. You got to sand it down because it apparently is shaped with it. Well, I could try. We'll see. I give it a shot before, but I have a feeling that's gonna end up being sanded a lot because it seems like there's a curve. I don't know. We'll see. But it's.
You should flight test it against the wall before you finish it.
It's been known to happen. Last flight. It's funny though. I've never, and I don't know why. It seems like I've never truly botched a model car or truck. I mean, I've had problems with them, but airplanes seem to be the thing that you can really screw up. And I guess part of it is that airplanes
thin pieces.
Well, it's not only that, and weird shapes and everything, but a car, is basically a shell that sits on four tires. At some level, you can pretty much always salvage it, not even if it doesn't turn out really the way you want. But an airplane, everything's got to be straight. Everything's got to be just so, because if airplanes aren't that way, they won't fly. And they have such distinctive lines to them that are so complex, the eye can quickly pick out if wings are bowed or the paint looks, especially the paint jobs on a lot of them are so exacting. And
well, I don't know about it won't fly. Anything will fly if you give it enough energy. It just may not fly straight.
We proved that with the space shuttle.
Yep.
But
and F4s.
Yeah. If a brick could fly, we'd call it the Phantom. So, let's see, guys. 80%, yeah. All things being maybe good to kit them. Yeah. It's actually a really interesting subject matter. The York, as I understand it, was they basically took the wings and tail of a Lancaster and put a cargo plane fuselage on it. It wasn't a bad airplane. Plastic Slave, I just did that the other day. Have you ever, interesting kit for Glue Troopers, have you ever had a kit that wound up hitting the wall literally sometime during construction? I don't know if you mean catapulted out of frustration or out of clumsiness, but I've knocked, the Cessna 182 that I went through so much trouble. It was a monogram Cessna 180, 1 to 141 scale, that I converted to a 182 and went to the trouble. I asked an old friend for a picture to make it the jump plane out of my hometown. And it was white with the bumblebee stripes around the fuselage, the black ailerons and everything. And I went through all this trouble. And I literally was about 85% done with it. And I swept it off the table with my arm. It hit the ground, smashed. And it's hanging up, and the tarp is now minus a landing gear. And it was just one of those things that I was like, God. There's, clumsiness is like stupidity. It's pretty infinite. Then my old joke, the difference between hydrogen and stupidity is that, there's a finite amount of hydrogen in the universe, but stupidity is infinite. And clumsiness apparently falls in that same category.
Somebody was able to get it right into a trash can directly.
Yeah. Well, you see what I mean? There's something about airplanes. They just seem to be the easiest things to screw up. Tanks are the hardest thing to screw up, because as long as you get the thing put together, you can slap paint on it and call it battle damage or camouflage or anything you want. You can hide a multitude of sins on armor. Depending on what kind of car you're making, you can sort of do it on that. But ships, but airplanes, nah. They're just something about them, the way they go together, the protrusions, all the little stuff. It's just hard, if anything's out of line, and it's hard to get everything aligned on one also. Although, cars can be tricky. One thing I've had trouble is aligning bumpers on cars. And when I was at JaxCon, the judges were literally walking around with their little calipers and their levels. And I remember saw one of them checking a guy's aircraft carrier, this beautiful model aircraft carrier with all airplanes on the deck. And the judge is up there with his little calipers and his little level, making sure everything. And I was like, think about it. On an aircraft carrier, sometimes the deck it can be a little warped, a little hard to get it to lay straight. And I've had that trouble.
That's just from airplanes crashing on
it. And the bumpers on cars, a lot of model cars, the bumpers only had 2 small attach points. So getting the body on the frame to sit straight and then get the bumper to true out and get it look right. Although some of the crap that came out of Detroit in the 70s, a little crookedness almost adds authenticity. But, oh yeah, I'd heard about that, more of that F4 got bent, yeah.
Actually straighten the plane out.
Yeah, well, yeah, they have praying those things a lot. One of the things and I might have this wrong, I was listening to an F4 pilot talk about it, and I knew an F4 pilot had mentioned this before, but apparently in an F4, under a certain speed and G loading, you don't use the ailerons. If you want to turn, you just mash the rudder. And I'm not sure what it is that happens, but it can cause a departure. And this guy was talking about that he had a colonel or something who was just getting his time in, and he overshot the target and instinctively rolled into the aileron. They were up above Mach whatever, and the airplane, it went sideways on him, and he had to get it back. He said they actually twisted the airframe. Those people don't appreciate that even though a Mach, these are supersonic jets that can handle these loads, they still flex and twist and get worn out. And they had that F-15 some years back that, the whole cockpit section just fell off in flight. Just all the years of pulling G's, and finally just decided to let go. The pilot ejected safely, but I was like, you're just sitting there flying along. Next thing you know, there goes the rest of my airplane. Why am I looking at the ground?
Sounds like the airplane ejected him.
Yeah. It was the pre-ejection release. But,
yeah, explain that to your buddies back in the cantina.
You can pull a military airplane apart. There are a lot of things, but they're not completely impervious. So, airliners, we operate under strict G limitations. And one of the things about if you ever model an airliner, I think airliners are one of the toughest things to do well, because you need the pretty paint job that you would put on a car on something that's much longer and thinner, and the straightness matters. And it's just like the cheat lines on a ship can be kind of tricky to get right, or a boat. And, a long straight line can be, especially over, sometimes these rockets with the curves and everything, it can be really tricky to get all the decals in place and get everything just lay right. And, hang on just a second. Speaking of just that, I'll give you a small example right here. Okay. This is the old Revell Redstone. I think it's a repop. But it took several tries, even at this scale, to get the curved stripes and everything to drop into the right place. They just don't want to sit there. They even the cigar bands one fought me. And, some guys will actually tape all this off and paint them. Well, they'll paint the whole rocket black, then use the tape to mark it off once it hardens, then shoot it with another primer coat, and then paint the everything and peel the tape off, and it looks freaking gorgeous. I did that with the Saturn V, and the problem is all that corrugation on the Saturn V makes it so tricky. In fact, it was this Saturn V right here, the very kit. Here, as long as I got it here. See if I get it.
Mark had that same kind of marking on it too. That was a whole lot of fun.
Well, all of these rockets have those black and white markings going back to the Germans and that movie, Frau und Moon. I'm probably saying it wrong. The Woman on the Moon. But you've got all this corrugation right here on the Saturn V, and up here, and that is extremely tough. I wound up using the liquid mask and then razoring it off, and then hitting it with clear coat and hitting it with the paint, and you know, but you're never quite satisfied because you look close, you can see nick marks from where you took off where you trimmed it, or you know, you're sitting there trying to touch it up, but you just, you know, you get self-critical, but it's really hard. Despite it's just black and white, it's really hard to paint a Saturn V properly. And there were little subtle differences in most of them. Same with lunar modules. There were differences in each one of them. But ironically, something as complicated as this albatross with the wood, that was actually easy to do. And it came out fairly well. And that was a road build that I brought home and painted after it was already built. I was happy with the way it turned out. You know, it's funny. You'll build a model. You never know what model is going to turn out really well without even trying that hard. The half track, of course, I didn't weather it like it is here. I made it sort of the factory new green, but it's just one basic color, and it wasn't a problem. It was a fairly straightforward, easy build. Didn't have any real gripes with it. And then I try to do something relatively simple like that Stenson and wind up fighting it tooth and nail. And the Rummel's rod was real easy to actually have that right here. And this, of course, I weathered the heck out of it. I had seen one that a glue trooper made that I was really impressed with, so sort of mimic that. And I let this one collect dust because it just adds authenticity to it. Well, I'm real happy with the way the Rummel's rod turned out. And the weathering on it, I thought I'd over weathered it, and I was like, nope, that's about what it should look like. And I just, this one was sent to me by Orange Tabby, and then Tom Daniel sent me one, TD sent me one, so I have it in the box right here. That's one of the few kits I'll probably never build because it's hand signed and everything. But the Jeep that comes with the paper Godzilla, now that's just the same Jeep they've been making for 30 years, but they I think it's an NPC kit, but they added the decals and then that paper Godzilla and everything, which was just hilarious. I couldn't not buy it. And but the Jeep's actually a really good kit. You remember that Jeep you gave me? I think it was a Hasegawa or a Tamiya. It was a model. It's right after I'd moved in the house, I think, like back in 03. Are you there?
You talking to me?
Yeah, I'm talking to you.
I gave you a Jeep?
I think so. It was a model. It was a kit model.
Well, yeah. I mean,
but this would have been back like, good God, Ken, this would have been 19 years ago.
I gave you a Jeep.
I think it was a Christmas present or a birthday present. He also gave me that Typhoon that I finally got around to building, or Tempest. I actually built that not that long ago. But anyway, it was a Tamiya kit, and that NPC kit was pretty much just about as good. And that's saying something, because Tamiya, you know, as we all know, makes really good kits. We seriously need the rest of what story?
Aren't really white. They're a very light gray. Right?
What's that?
I said Saturn V's aren't really white. They're a very light gray.
Well, I ain't repainting it.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
No.
Don't you remember when you had that Saturn V model rocket made in the
Philippines? They sent me the gray. It was gray and black. When Max's models, actually Delton models, when I was dealing with models on the internet, most of them were wood, pre-made wooden display desktop display models. That's how I got into this whole thing. And I mean, as a business. And so the fellow in the Philippines was making models for me, and I sent him pictures of the Saturn V. And apparently, this is back in the days when you fax that stuff over. And he made it gray and black. Go figure. And I guess he just looked at that. That must have been the way it came through on his fax machine. So I gave it to Ken. You still have it.
I do.
By the way, I'm just making a little tea here, but I'm not trying to hide anything from you guys. I just didn't think it would be very live streamy to do it in front of the camera.
I like the background. I think that looks pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty much where most of my day went. Thing's heavier than it looks too, but you know what? It works great. It's a lot better than how that Petavan. I mean, sort of sets the mood for the whole thing, and
yeah, and it gives you something to do with all those boxes.
it did clean out some space on the shelf where I got the empty boxes, and I might tack a couple more down here. I didn't think that was going to show, but it didn't show on the test run. But
how much higher up does it go past the Star Trek?
that's it. That's the here.
Oh, that's the top of it.
That's it.
I'll take your word for it.
Although there is a little bit of stuff off camera. I got it up against the wall on the other side. And, oh, actually I could have moved it over a few more inches. Nothing much. It's just, that little Ming Lexington that I built. Well, you know, you don't appreciate how many models you built until you start going through the empty box and you're like, holy crap. Running out of places to put them.
I sound like I'm on an Apollo flight.
There is no white in a black and white TV. It's not a fact. I'm just checking on the notes here.
Do I sound kind of funny?
Hey, John, glad you made it. I talked with Steve's Model Mania and my brother Steven, and then I chatted with Steve Lato, and my wife goes, you're collecting Steve's.
You still have a problem?
And you know what? How do I reply to that? Anyway.
Pick one. We got more than one.
But, you know, one of the things about armor, though, is that a lot of guys are into linking tracks, which is very time consuming, but it really does. You get the metal sag, and it really does look good. Most everybody hates the vinyl and rubber band tracks, like the ones that come with this half track. And I got to tell you, I think the one thing about armor vehicles, if anybody's going to throw one against the wall, it's going to be dealing with tracks, especially if they're vinyl tracks. And it's hard to find a decent glue that'll really hold them together. And then you have the problem of if you try to stretch it over the rollers to get them on, you know, it's so, I don't know how many Panzer IV axles I broke trying to get those things on there. And if you try to wrap it around and then glue it together, it'll never glue probably because it's under tension. So, like with a real tank, the Chieftain is always talking about track tension. I'm like, yeah, it's even on model tanks, it's a pain in the keister.
I sound like I'm on the phone because I am on the phone.
Yeah, he's on the phone. Literally, I just got it next to the microphone. And, but he's supposed to be wingmanning me here, wingmanning me here with the comment stream because I can't keep up with it while I'm doing the show usually, unless I sit here and go.
Actually, he can't read very well, so I kind of help him out a little bit.
I reads just fine. Please send 200 box tops to receive your free Max's Model empty box t-shirt. That should be a t-shirt.
There you go.
You ever get a kit that you actually look at it with dread? Like any sailing ship. You're like, oh, that rigging. But you got guys like Bruce, you know, the Mystic Modeler, and he just loves them. He does a great job on those things. And I'm looking at that Mach 2 York, and I'm just going, I shall grind thee into submission.
I remember looking at a sailing ship model many, many years ago and thinking, wow, that is way too much work.
That Felix, though, is probably the most enormous project I've ever taken on, and most of that was the rigging. Not to mention that Wingnut Wings just has an insane level of detail. And but you know what it is, though, Ken, is a lot of people. Well, actually, on the Felix, though, the engines are exposed, so for once you get to see a lot of that detail. But the inside of the airplane's mostly hidden, and it's fully detailed. And it really, I've come to the conclusion, it's just the challenge of doing it. You know, but if I get another airplane like that, though, I swear I'm building the interior as its own display to set beside the model. Wingnut wings would make a perfect model to do like a cutaway with because the interiors are so detailed. And you know, you could do half the airplane, put the whole interior in there where you could see it, with only half the fuselage, you know, and maybe wing studs and one engine, and save the rest of the stuff for a diorama or something, and then take the other half and like put it against a mirror with the wing, so when you hang it on a wall, the mirror makes it look like a whole airplane. That's a trick I know some model builders do.
Didn't some kits come that way, that you could remove some panels and you could see some interior detail?
Yeah, there have been various kits that way, and one of them, and I always forget the name of it, Vision Scope or something, where they will put like a slide inside and you like look in the hatch turret, the turret on the hatch, and you can see the picture of the inside of a tank, or look inside the submarine on the hatch on the sail. You'd see a picture of the inside of a submarine. And
yeah, I remember when I was a kid, I saw this submarine that the whole side came off and you could see
all. Oh no, that's something else. That was actually a couple of them were done that way. I think the Skipjack was done that way. Now the thing I'm talking about had some weird name like Omnivision or VistaVision or Photovision, something like that. Photoscope, I think was the name of it. And they literally, you could look inside. They had like a film slide of the interior of a tank, and I'm kind of like, first off, I'm looking at the wrong angle for it to look like that. But if you're going to do that, why not just build a model interior of the tank and just take the turret out and go, hey, look, what you can do with some tanks. I see these guys, for some reason, Tiger One seem to be the one they do it with the most. They make these incredibly detailed interiors, right down to spent shell casings. They put the turret on, you can't see it, but the turret can be removed. And you look at it and you're like, that is fantastic. And you're like, a lot of times the model contest will actually display the turret on the side just so you can see all the work.
Jack Fleming fan said Aurora had a King Tiger tank like that.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Well, with a cutaway or something. And the Polaris sub was the one that came like that.
Yeah, I remember as a kid I had one of those subs that had a little hatch you could open up. You could see the reactor inside.
Did I just hear a dog growl?
No, that was me.
You hungry?
No, I was just doing a sound effect.
Oh, okay. I thought it was my stomach growling. I was like, behave.
No, that tends to shake the camera.
God. 30-bit. These freaking... By the way...
You know what would be kind of cool? Is like to have a model, I don't know, maybe like a tank or something like that, and then you just have like one of those little peepholes that you could look through the side, and you would actually be looking through a slide, and you have a little light inside the thing, and it looked like you're actually looking into.
That's the photoscope or photovision I was talking about.
Oh, is that what that was? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
They usually put the peephole in one of the hatches, I think, but yeah, that's. Oh gosh, now I gotta go look it up. I'm pretty sure it was called photoscope. Let's see. Photoscope model. Whoa, that is not what I expected to see.
Is that a good thing?
Never mind. Just never mind. Kit model.
You might need to be a little more specific.
Aurora. I think it was Aurora that made them. Yeah, there it is. Photoscope. Okay, hold on, wait. Let's see. The Skipjack. It was a Skipjack. Haha. Now this is a photoscope model. Copy image. Sorry guys, takes me a second here.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's called the Thomas Jefferson sub kit. I remember that now. Yeah.
Photoscope. I have to go find one of these on eBay someday just to see what all the fuss was about. I mean, it was just a marketing thing. Okay. Plus image.
Google carefully.
Yeah, really. Browse. Okay, there it is. Okay, let me expand it here for you.
Oh, that's interesting. While you're
You
looking
see,
for
I
it.
mean, looks like a little pervert peeping down a fourth dimensional kit for builders. Anyway, that's, puts you inside your hobby. And so that's the kit I was talking about. Photoscope, not photoscope. Okay. Trust me, when I put in photoscope model, well, I got an eyeful.
I'll bet you did.
Can't unsee that.
That just looks weird. That picture.
Yeah, it's like, hey, mommy, look what's in here. Ah, here, they did one with a tank, yeah.
But they don't show you what you're seeing.
Yeah, I was thinking there was one advertisement that showed you what you saw, but I'm not finding it. They did the Tiger tank, and they did the Stalin tank. I guess that's the IS-1 or IS-2. But they're all, yeah, it's all the same thing. It's just, okay. Sorry, guys. Takes me a second to get it. Done. Plus.
You get to see what spiders see.
Oh, God. Okay. Now there's the photoscope on the tank, and you notice on this one they got the kid again looking all pervy. Peeping. It looks like he's snorting cocaine off that thing.
Stuart is telling me I'm too silly?
Okay, I'm gonna have to work harder if you're the one that they're. But they just took their existing kits and added this to it. I mean, they're trying to push the styrene. One of the problems you run into in the kit model business is, you make these expensive molds, you crank out the kit, everybody one's got one. Now you've got a very expensive mold, the model's not something, you got to move on to the next thing. It's a tough business, and but you don't dare sell the molds to anybody else as long as you're in business, because they'll start competing with you. One of the old model kits for that image, by the way, and the last one. And I wonder if there's one of those on eBay. Let me just run out and check real quick. We're all here just having fun.
Apparently buying secondhand model kits in New Zealand is it comes with extra stuff in it.
Oh, really?
It's like a dead spider.
Oh. Well, I'm not seeing anything under photoscope. I did find a set of directions for the Tiger tank. Tiger tank model instructions only from 1970. Photoscope. So $24. Are you kidding me? Gosh, I wonder how much all those instructions have piled up in the Tarbis are worth. Okay, let's see what's going on. Fedor tank of the Swedish S tank. I almost bought that Swedish S tank from Tamiya just because they had it. It was $3. That brings up a question that's an ongoing thing over at on Chieftain's channel and at the British the Tank Museum. I imagine most of you guys are probably familiar with the Stridswagen or the Swedish S tank. I'll show a picture for those who aren't. It is a turretless tank, and it's really an interesting vehicle.
Was it tracked or wheeled?
It's tracked, but it has no turret. Hold on, let me just. I know a lot of folks already know what it looks like, but this is just for those who don't have some imagery. Okay, file, save as S tank, which spells stank. S tank spells stank. Anyway, whoops, no. Are you sure you want to exit? No. Dang, I'm almost accidentally closed the program. Lay out the buttons, Max. Hit the button, Max. Okay, let's see. Okay. This is a Stridsvagn, or the S tank. And let me fit the screen. And as you can tell, it does not have a turret. And they use that thing for 30 or 40 years. Now, Sweden, of course, has a purely defensive military. It's got like a 70-degree slope on the armor. The gun, you have to rotate the vehicle. It does, the tracks do pneumatically raise and lower, so you can angle the gun up and down a lot. But it's an ambush weapon. It's strictly a defensive weapon. But a lot of people ask, is that a tank or is that actually a tank destroyer? I've always felt that a tank has a 360-degree rotating turret. That's part of what makes it a tank. And a lot of people like that's actually a tank destroyer, like the Germans used in World War II, like the Stug. But the Swedish insist it's a tank. And I'll let you guys argue that one out. But I don't even think it has a defensive machine gun or anything. It's pretty much just it's an ambush weapon for Russian armor. I mean, that's really what it is.
How many did they make?
I don't know, but quite a few. I mean, it was their primary armor vehicle for, I think, the 60s to the 90s or something like that. And anyway, the Tamiya kit was the first one I ever saw. It was also the first Tamiya kit I remember seeing. It was $3 back in like 1967. What? It's like a doorstop. Yeah, you articulate the gun left and right by rotating the vehicle. And now you see how short coupled it is? You notice it's only got the 4 main wheels down there. A short, wide vehicle like that can actually pivot very, very easily. That was part of the design. Has a 3-man crew. They go in through the rear, although I think there's a hatch on top for the commander. I think they go in through the rear. Got a lot of armor up front. It'd be really hard to knock out. It'd be really hard to see. Extremely low silhouette. Thing's only like 6.5, 7 feet tall. I mean, it was a purpose-built vehicle. And, that brings up, I've harped on this before, but most countries build tanks to suit whatever is specific to that country. And the Russians could take their tanks, or the Germans could take their tanks on rail a lot of the way. So they can have these big, heavy monsters because they don't have to transport them on ships or airplanes. Americans, since we deploy all over the world, even though we have big tanks, they have to be deployable. During the Second World War, that meant Liberty ships, which had a lot to do with the design of the Sherman was actually designed to meet a British specification, but we had to get it over to them. So that was, and a lot of people feel that the old Sherman back in World War II was the best all-around tank, because it and the British Matilda II are the only 2 tanks that served in every theater. I mean, they were, you name it, they were there. And so, given that they perform competently...
Wikipedia made 290 of them.
Okay. Yeah, small country, small army, 200, that sounds probably about right. I don't know if they sold any abroad or not. Swedish are pretty, I don't know, they sell their jet fighters, but they're pretty particular about who they sell to. At least they have been in the past. But it's an interesting vehicle, but it's purpose-built for the needs of Sweden. And, there are some vehicles that are made to be sold to anybody that'll buy them. And MiG-21's a classic example. It met the needs for the Russians, but it also met the needs for a lot of other countries. So they sold them to air forces all over the world. And then there are some weapon systems that countries won't sell to anybody else. For example, I don't think we ever sold the M1 Abrams to anybody. And so, whereas the other countries actually mostly will sell their stuff, their tanks and everything. But I don't know of any other country that has a restriction on selling them. Not necessarily they have sales, but this tank assembles with a single Allen wrench from IKEA.
Kind of sounds like your Jeep.
Northern Man is asking if anybody has an Avro C-102 airliner from Welsh Models or Execuform VAC who have it in their stash and would like to let it go. So if any of you guys have that and are interested, contact Northern Man. Swedish military is the equivalent of the Australian hockey team.
What's that all about?
It's a pretty small military, and they take their weekends off. Although personally, I think the hockey team would be far more aggressive. But why the Raphael selling so well? No U.S. or Russian parts? No, yeah. Yeah, Mike nailed it. It's not the best tank in the world, but it's the best tank for us. That was a very purpose-built machine. And the Russian fascination with enormous armor, though, I can't help but think some of that was as a result of their experience with the Germans. But even though the JS tanks scared the heck out of the West, especially when they showed the first ones at the end of the war, we didn't have anything that could penetrate the armor on it. I mean, we were like, holy crap. Fortunately, they were breakdown queens, so they. I don't think any of the JS tanks ever proved themselves reliable, but it did pioneer that frying pan turret, which became pretty much standard on Russian tanks and to an extent still is. And when they came out with the T-54 and 55, they got the formula right on that one. But it's funny. Countries like Britain, Russia, America, tanks are one thing all these countries seem to do fairly well. I think everybody learned from the Second World War. And even the modern tank kits. Well, think about it, games like we're seeing tanks get knocked out in the Ukraine, and people. It's gotten to the point where it's a meme. But it was pointed out some of these tanks are rolling off without any infantry support, getting off by themselves, and anybody's vulnerable no matter what you're driving. But a lot of people asked if tanks are still relevant on the battlefield today, and take it from a former infantryman. Yeah, they're still quite relevant. If you go out in the desert like we did in Iraq, where they're hard to hide, you've got the Air Force, good flying weather, so all the Air Forces of the NATO nations can pick them off with Mavericks. Then they wind up going against M1 Abrams, the latest, best tank in the world. Yeah, they didn't fare so well, but don't forget, we had tanks that were just better than their tanks. So, yeah, the tank's very relevant. But if it's used improperly, or it's an old worn-out one that can't stand up to modern weapons, it's not going to last very long. But it happens every time there's a war and some tanks get knocked out. Oh, the day of the tank is past. No, it didn't. Tanks are the stuff infantry nightmares are made of. Now I want to build that tank.
Really only vulnerable if you have an anti-tank weapon. If the people you're going up against don't have those or are very limited, then yeah, I would agree with you. The tank is still very relevant.
Yeah. Well, but the thing, what people forget is none of these systems are standalone. They're all part of a combined arms team. You need air defense. You need air strike capability. You need armor. You need armored personnel carriers. You need foot infantry. You need helicopters. It all works together. Anything gets off by itself is just a target.
Yeah, the Germans had anti-aircraft tanks. I don't remember what they were called.
They had the Ostwind, the Wirbelwind, and a couple of others. And we actually played with it. Well, this half-track is our idea of anti-aircraft armor. It was designed the twin 50s, and they later had quad 50s also, which was a towed system. But they were anti-aircraft. But by the time we got into Europe, we had such air supremacy that we didn't really use them that much. They had the Duster with the M42, which had the twin 40 millimeters on it, high rate fire, and they wound up using them extensively in Vietnam to shoot at the enemy on the ground. Turned out they were far more effective for enemy suppression and shooting up the bush than anyone had ever anticipated. When I was in the Army, we had the, what would they call that thing? Not the Dragon. It was basically an M113 armored personnel carrier with a 20 millimeter Vulcan Gatling gun on it. And it spit a lot of lead downrange. The Russians have the Zeus ZSU 23-4, which I think some variant of that's still in operation. And it's got 4 separate 23 millimeter cannons that shoot at high rate. It's radar. They're all radar guided now. Yeah, anti-aircraft artillery is still out there. And, of course, rockets and missiles missiles have taken over a lot of the man pads. But sometimes just a good old gun can do you right. And the nice thing about having these things with the Gatling guns on them and everything is that you can use them against land targets also. And, boy, they'll clear the brush.
Were they effective with the radar as anti-aircraft artillery?
I don't think we've ever used ours in combat. The Russians did, and my understanding is they used them against the Israelis to devastating effect. Now, to be clear, at that time, the Israelis did not have any jamming pods on their aircraft. So, like any radar can be jammed. But yeah, they were very effective. Probably one of the best systems the Russians fielded, from what I understand. And I'm sure somebody must make a model of the ZSU 23-4. That's an interesting. They in the movie Red Dawn, they have a mock-up of one driving around the town. It's got the 4 23 millimeter cannons, quad mount cannons sticking out of the front, and they use that same prop again, I think, in Flight of the Intruder. Which, by the way, when I do this interview next, I guess in June now, the other guy is going to be Mark Finlinson. He's a special effects guy, and he did a lot of the model building for Flight of the Intruder. So I want to pick his brain. I want to know how you walk into an empty table and go, okay, make me a Model A6 with a 6-foot wingspan. It's not like you can go buy a kit. So, okay, so what... I mean, you guys just start, drawing pictures and shaping wood or what? Because these models in Hollywood are freaking expensive because you got a lot of professional model builders that spend a lot of time to make them. And, but when it's done well, the results are impressive. My favorite line in Flight of the Intruder is like, the bombs are still on the wings. It's like, hey guys, they didn't try. You gotta be kidding me. And Willem Dafoe looks at Brad Johnson and just goes, they'd never expect us to come back.
Yeah, let's do that.
And there's a good reason why.
And then when you come back with your airplane full of holes, you got to explain why that power plant was so well protected.
You got to explain why radar tracks you over in North Vietnam. But anyway, that was... Eduardo is getting to his point in college where he's starting to study the Cold War and the Vietnam War. Try explaining the Vietnam War to somebody who's like, wasn't alive back then and didn't live through the Cold War.
The politics.
Yeah, a lot of things you look back at it. Yeah, they kind of look at you with that puzzled look, and they keep wanting to ask why. I'm like, I know, this sounds ridiculous.
Really, Dr. Strangelove had a 12-foot model with a B-52. Oh,
Impressive.
I'd love to have seen that.
Yeah. Well, they had someone about that size in the movie Strategic Air Command, and one day I stumbled onto a photograph of the 3 B-47 models. I guess they were done using them, and each one of them had a different purpose. Like one of them had a landing gear that went up and down for that scene and the landing scenes and stuff. And but I've never been able. And I was like, what happened to those models? And and it was Strategic Air. Let's see. Okay, that totally didn't work in movie. But I was like, man, they went through all that work.
Yeah,
just amazing. A lot of times they do. A lot of times they destroy them because they don't want some, low rent, guy coming in and making some cheesy movie with it afterwards. And, now normally you'd think they'd go into a warehouse, and I can't find it. Studio models, Strategic Air Command, but it was really impressive workmanship, and I hate to think those things were later destroyed, but they probably were. That's kind of what happens to a Hollywood model. And let's see, Hollywood studio model P-47. Maybe that'll turn something up. We got a lot of nicely built models of B-47s, but none of them from... Holy crap, wait a second. What did I just find here?
I'm remote because Max is a 5-hour drive.
Oh, this is the guy that made a remote control B-47. Okay, never mind, that's not...
Oh, is that the one with the 8 jet engines?
No, the B-47 had 6. Two and a...
Six. Okay.
Yeah.
But somebody actually built B-52, a model of a B-52 with 8 jet engines. It weighed, I think, like 147 pounds.
Yeah, I've seen the footage of that. By the way, I think it's the Air Force Museum has a B-47 with a training cockpit that has a side pulled away, and that was what they used for the interior shots for that movie. I can't find it. Oh well. It was just one of those things I stumbled onto one day. But put that back up. So, well, guys, what do we got else going on? What do you guys want to talk about?
Actually, Diane, I am moving closer. I'm buying a house in
That's a cruise again.
in Fort Pierce, and then I'll be about 2.5, maybe 3 hours away from Max.
Ken doesn't drink coffee. There.
The guy, they were flying at an air show.
Yep, and it crashed.
And somebody wasn't paying real close attention, and it got away from him, and it crashed. I actually emailed the guy who built the thing and asked him if he was going to build another one. He said no.
Now, Don is asking about the original Enterprise. Of course, what he mentions is in the Smithsonian, but don't forget there were two of them. There was the 11-footer and the 3-footer. And the 3-footer disappeared. That was the one that was on Roddenberry's desk for a while, but he also had the original Klingon ship. And as long as we're talking about studio models, and I know I've covered this, but I'll just rehash. Remember that AMT got Matt Jeffries to design the Klingon battlecruiser, and Star Trek was not going to ever show a Klingon ship. Because they didn't have the money to build the studio model and everything. And AMT said, look, these Enterprise models are selling like hotcakes. We need something else. So they got Matt Jeffries. They made an agreement with, I guess, I don't know if it was Desilu or Paramount. I think Desilu was already fading out of the picture at this point. It's probably Paramount. Anyway, I get a Steve Poe's book. But anyway, so Paramount, or the studio, let's just say the studio agreed, if you guys foot the bill for having the studio models made, you can have the rights to the model. So Matt Jeffries designs a Klingon battlecruiser. AMT pays for a couple of them to be built. One goes to the studio for shooting. The other goes to AMT to be pantographed down into the kit. And then the studio gets the other one back, which ends up on Roddenberry's desk, if I'm not mistaken. That became, I believe, part of his estate. But there was also a 3-foot Enterprise. Now, there were 3 different kinds of models of the Enterprise that were used in the original series. Obviously, the 11-footer, which actually, according to a couple of videos I found, some people who researched this, they didn't actually shoot that much footage of it. They just reused the same footage over and over again. It was a 3-foot model they did a lot of the work with. And they didn't actually do that much shooting on either one of them because for budgetary reasons, as well as there's only so many angles you can shoot it from, they just kept, in fact, I'm not even sure if they did any photography after the first season of the ship, but the bridge changed, so they must have. Yeah, they did, because they put the balls on the engines and the bridge changed and everything. But what was it? The point I was getting at is that the 3-foot model disappeared, and I forget the story on it. They lent it to somebody for something, and it just kind of disappeared. Well, apparently a couple of years ago, a photo showed up on the internet. Somebody was making this big, well, it was I think a professional model shop was making one of the Enterprises of the movies, and in the background was a 3-foot Enterprise. And a lot of people think that may be the missing model, and apparently they were using it for reference, but no one knows where it is now. And my guess is, the people in the know it's probably in some cagey collector's collection, but. All the wiring was on one side, and when you see it going the other way, they just put the numbers on backwards. In fact, in one frame, you can actually see where the tape's starting to peel. They just put it in and reversed, flip the film around. And I remember seeing the Smithsonian in its original condition, and I was really impressed with it. Then I saw it after they had refurbished it, and I was like, "You guys altered an artifact," which is, it does look better, I'll grant you that, but still, you altered an artifact.
Well, the idea
Philistines!
They actually took it down to the paint that it was original. They said there was more than one color of paint on the thing.
People argue this day, light gray, goose egg, blue. There's still debates on what color it's supposed to be, and a lot of it just depends on the lighting.
Yeah. Somebody was also wondering about the shuttle that they used in Star Trek. There's a story behind that as well.
Well, that again was AMT. That's how AMT got involved. I know you guys have heard me harp on this before. I'll give the 10-cent tour. AMT, Roddenberry writes a script for Star Trek. It's going to be a wagon train to the stars. And he wants his shuttlecraft. And he draws it, and Matt Jeffries draws this beautiful shuttlecraft, teardrop shaped, wings, engines out on the... And it was cool. Very, very Rocketeer looking with a round front and everything. And,
can you find a picture of that?
Yeah, sure. So, they tell Roddenberry that there is no way we're putting all this money into this, to making this very expensive prop for a pilot. And he goes, "But I've got to be able to." This is the actual Matt Jeffries drawing, if I'm not mistaken. Hang on, let me just download this real quick.
I remember you showed that to me. I thought it was really cool.
It is. Yeah, they did a great job. Okay, now let me go back here. Plus image. Okay. Browse. And there it is. All right, there it is. That's what the shuttlecraft was originally supposed to look like. Yeah, you'll have it in a few seconds. Well, anyway, they were like, this is gonna be way too expensive, and so you're gonna have to find a cheaper way to move the plot along. You have to remember, it was just a plot device, and so they came up with the idea of the transporter just because of budgetary constraints and everything. So when they make the first pilot with Jeffrey Hunter, they just beam him down. That's the whole thing with the goldfish bowl with the gold glitter and the black behind it and superimposing. A cheap and dirty way to get them to move the plot along. It was a plot device. So the pilot doesn't get picked up. So they try it one more time. This time they recast. They have William Shatner. And there are all kinds of theories about why the first plot didn't sell. But anyway, so it's unheard of for a television show to get a second pilot, but it did. And the second pilot sold. So before the show goes on air, they're shooting the episodes. They already got a few of the special effects shot. And AMT sees the ship. The guys at AMT see the ship and they go, that would be a cool model. I bet we could sell a bunch of those. So they hire an ad agency out in Arizona. Steve Poe gets the job to go to Hollywood and talk to him. Roddenberry still wants his shuttlecraft. And the producers at Desilu are like, no, we don't got the money. Use your transmuter. It's transporter. Whatever. So when Poe shows up and says we'd like to get the rights to make the model, they strike a deal. Tell you what. Make the shuttlecraft interior sets and the shuttlecraft exterior vehicle full size, because we're going to have actors interacting with it, and you can have the rights. So they contract, they work with Jeffries, I think, to come up with design, something more basic, the shuttlecraft we know and love. And it didn't get delivered for a while, which is why you don't see the shuttlecraft, any actors of the shuttlecraft. I don't think it's used in the first season. Anyway, but they get their shuttlecraft, and AMT gets the rights to make the model of the Enterprise. And that's how that deal was done. It was an exchange of, instead of actual cash and license, it was an exchange of make this expensive prop for us and you can have the license. And then they wound up making millions of models of the Enterprise. And they were like, man, this Star Trek stuff's popular. And they wanted more stuff, and that led into the whole story of the Klingon battle cruiser. Yeah, we'll pay for the bloody thing, just as long as we get to make the models. And that's how the Klingon battle cruiser was actually on the shelves about a month before it was on the show. And I remember, I think it was Doyle Pope getting one and showing it to Billy. I would have been about 7 years old, I guess. And I was just intrigued. Because you gotta remember this, as you know, Ken, you were around, it was the height of the space race in the mid-'60s. Anything to do with space grabbed, you know, a young kid's imagination. And,
did mine. I remember I was totally enthralled with the show. It was so much better than anything else that was out there. And it wasn't space horror. It was a space adventure.
Yeah. And, well, the whole idea was it was a wagon train to the stars. The show was, you know, going to have a different location, everything, which they did. Don's pointing out the second pilot was filmed because Lucille Ball insisted on it. One for her, never would have made. I think I've heard that before. That sounds right, because she was running Desilu at the time. And Desilu wasn't at one studio. They had plots all over Hollywood. Apparently, Lucy, who was an extremely good businesswoman, Lucille Ball, and despite her comedic character, a very serious person in business and stuff. And they had bought a bunch of little, because Hollywood's got all these little studios. And they would go belly up, and she'd buy them for next to nothing, and that would give her more sets and sound stages. But Desilu itself eventually, I don't know the story behind why they went out of business, but they eventually sold out. And it stood for, you know, Desi and Lucy. So Desilu only did Star Trek the first season. But that's how they struck the deal. And when the Star Trek is a franchise, it's like Star Wars, is a franchise that would never die. It was a... They, even after the show was off the air, that's when they released Spock and the Explorer kit and the shuttlecraft model. These things all came out after the series was over, and they still sell today. In fact, who is it? It's not Polar Lights that makes the really, because the shuttlecraft was always very wrong. I've got one on my shelf. It doesn't. There's just a lot of it's wrong. It was a very simplistic model, and I get it. They were just trying to knock something out cheap. But the new one's it's a $50 kit, but it's very detailed. And the shuttlecraft's a little more complicated than people remember. So anyway...
does that kit have the fancy bussard intake lights?
I don't know if it has the bussard intake lights, but it has the curves on... The sides of the shuttle came up into a curve over the top of the vehicle, which I'm sure was just a fashion, but like the one from AMT just has a little flat ridge on it. It doesn't have the little curve. It doesn't have all the crap in the back. It just has a flat wall that you just glue put decals on and glue the little rear tail skid to. But actually the shuttle was scalloped out back there and had some features and stuff. And the new kit is much more accurate. The
real one, somebody found like
hey,
15,
Peter.
20 years ago and refurbished it.
Yeah, that's right. It's in a museum now. And I've sat in Kirk's chair. The original bridge set was found in a bloody playground in California. And they salvaged what was left, and they had it in the Smithsonian. Were you with me when we did that? I don't know. It might have been before I met you, because I was living up in D.C. at the time, and they had the big Star Trek exhibit at the Smithsonian. And then
I remember that, but I didn't know you could sit in the chair. Yeah.
I mean, they'd had to put the seat was gone, so they just put like a padded board across it. But it was before the day of cell phone cameras. They had the original hand-typed, Gene Roddenberry hand-typed screenplay of the pilot under glass, and a couple of one of the phasers. It wasn't a hero prop. It was one of the wooden phasers that they could throw around and stuff. But I remember the script was open to the first page, the introduction, and I still remember the line I read. This is a story about a man based on Horatio Hornblower who is driven but not driving. And that was the description of the captain. Good night, Raymond. Yeah, I think Chuck's right. I think the rounded edges probably had to do with the way they had to build the prop. But point is that the AMT model shaved them off, and there was actually, I saw a guy who accurized one of the old AMT kits, and I thought about doing it, but it was just a ton of work. You had to cut a lot of stuff out and scratch build stuff, and I was like, geez, you know what? I'll just wait till they come out with a better kit. Now they've got the accurate kit, and I haven't bought one. But I would love the Firefly Star Trek crossover. Yeah, not sure you'd have to pull that off, but why not? I mean, if we can have 3 Spider-Men in one movie.
That would be really strange to see something like that.
But the whole thing though is that the model building is an extremely expensive endeavor for both Hollywood to make the props and for the industry to cut the molds. And you look at the molds, and it's just hard to believe how much money goes into taking a block of steel and removing exactly the right amount of steel that it'll work. And it's but in Hollywood they destroy these things half the time, and I'm like, it's got to be hurtful to and I've seen this on Pierce Films. They talk about this. The guys work so hard on building these props, and they blow them up at the end of the movie or something, and it's like, well, that's just the job. And at the Battle of Britain, they burned all of the radio-controlled airplanes. Well, I kind of understood why. They couldn't bring them back with them. It was a cost. The models had done their job. They were in Spain. The models had done their job, and they didn't want to pay to store them. I was like, I'm surprised you didn't just sell them to somebody, because I'm sure they would have been popular. But for whatever reason, it was easier just to torch them. I'm like, oh God, sin against modeling.
This is wrong.
Yeah, this is wrong on so many levels.
Wow. Who knew how if you'd gone back in time and said, hey, don't stop making Star Trek, it's going to become immensely popular, and there's going to be spin-offs, and there's going to be conventions, they would have looked at you like you were crazy.
The first convention, as I understand it, was in Atlanta in 1975, if I remember correct from watching the documentary, and it was about 30 guys, just got together and said, hey, let's hold this little... Okay, now, my first Star Trek convention wasn't really a convention, but we're going back, it was before I went in the Army, so I guess we're talking about 77. And this is kind of how much of a grip it had. My brother had a first generation Enterprise, the one with the little wheat bulbs in it and the little U-shaped inserts for the engines of cells that always sag so badly, and his did too. And I always remembered that, and I was like, oh, I'll never have one of those models. And anyway, now they're like $300 on eBay. So then around 75, which is about 6 years after the show goes off the air, they have this model convention, which was about on par with when you go to your local comic book store and they're having one of their weekend deals, And it was guys, Leonard Nimoy put out a record, and I remember Brother had it, and it was just memorabilia and trading and stuff, and kits and posters and things like that. And somebody apparently took a little film footage. It says this, everybody with the 1975 haircuts. Oh my God. Anyway, but they decided, hey, this is pretty cool, and they started doing it, and it caught on pretty quick. Well, within a couple of years, there was a guy, and I met him in Tallahassee a couple of times, and he had some blooper reels on film and some what they call cast films, the gag movies they make and stuff. And he would go to the college campuses and show these movies. And my brother told me about seeing one at Georgia Tech. Well, when I was in college years later, it was the same thing. They were still, pre-internet. And it wasn't just Star Trek, it was other stuff as well, but gag reels, and now you can see it all on YouTube. But then they started having Trekoramas. Now, I don't know if you guys ever been to a Trekorama. This was a total 70s thing. But the Trekorama, a local TV station would play Star Trek, usually like on a Saturday, the viewing time, just, there was you got to understand, in those days, when you had a television station in the United States, you had local programming and you had network programming. And the network programming went from the news at 6 p.m. and ended, I think, at 10 p.m. So like a 4-hour window. But the weekends often didn't have any network programming. The local stations would just run old movies and stuff, whatever they could. So the local station had a Trekorama. And it was like 24 hours of Star Trek. So, actually, what was it, 72 episodes? So that wasn't a problem. And without getting too into it, they would green screen a local guy into a model of the bridge, which I thought was hilarious. And it was a little on the cheesy side, but a lot of fun. Well, while this was going on, this guy would come to Tallahassee and he would spend a weekend in the mall, and he would just get a bunch of, rent out space in the mall, and he would be in the middle of the hallway, not in a store. And he just had all the Star Trek memorabilia. And I remember being so excited to finally get to go there because I'd missed him the year before. And I didn't have a lot of money. I think I bought a Tribble, a couple of pictures, and a poster, Star Trek poster of the Enterprise. Not unlike the painting I have up on the wall, about the same angle where you're looking up at it. That thing, those pictures adorned our walls along with a gazillion bottle box tops for years. I mean, till I got back in the Army, they were still up there. And, heck, I probably got a picture of it. I remember taking a picture with my flash camera, and the flash made it look like, a big light block. And it looked just like the Enterprise was taking a photon hit. I was like, that was too cool. Just catching a few of the comments.
Nothing interesting, really. Just people talking about different stuff at the Star Trek things.
Well, anyway, I'm just the Trekorama, da, da, da. And I actually called up the TV station because if you have a favorite episode, and requested the Trouble with Tribbles, and they showed it. And Trekathon, not Trekorama, Trekathon, that's what it was, Trekathon. And that guy, I don't know how he made a living doing this, and
Garfield was talking about a commercial on YouTube with the two Spocks. The old Spock drives a Benz, and the new Spock drives an Audi.
Yeah, we'll look that up. Yeah. Once the things got bigger, and moved into convention centers, they sort of lost that local feel. And when I went down for the 40th anniversary of Star Wars, which was in Orlando, we were in Daytona, and Eduardo had told us, hey, it's going on right now. And normally our family plans everything we do, but I said, really? And he said, well, it's only an hour down the road. You guys want to go? And on a lark, we jumped in the car and went down there. Boy, we did not know what we were getting in for. But there were a gazillion vendors. They had about a quarter or third scale at in there. The thing had to be, 14 feet high. I didn't appreciate how big the Orlando Civic Center is. They had a full-size TIE fighter in there. And anyway, so half the people are dressed as Imperials. And, after a while, all those Imperial uniforms and Stormtrooper uniforms started to get a little creepy. I was like, but I think we, there's an occupational army of cosplayers here. And I mean, they had Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford and a lot of the other big names there, but you had to pay like $1,200 to be in the audience to see them live. And of course, they aired it on all the local monitors and everything, but it was like they had enough they had more than presidential security in that place, so you weren't going to get into the, to see the actors or something. I mean, it was legitimately like dealing with royalty. And I was like, we're just here to have a good time. And we were there on the live stream. It was like a 48-hour live stream, and we were on it because, hey, look, there we are, yay! And so we're part of Star Wars canon, whee!
I'm just kind of curious how many of those people will be on Elon Musk's ships to Mars, trying to live the dream.
Yeah, maybe their grandkids will be. I don't know. Elon is an interesting breed of cat. But the one reason I go to a Star Trek convention or a Star Wars convention or something like that, though, is a lot of vendors, and in whatever model you want, somebody's probably going to have it, including the rare stuff. You'll pay a premium for it, but if it's that important to you, you can probably find it. One model they never made, I thought they should, was the model spacecraft that Archer built in the television show Enterprise when he came back to when he was a kid and flying the RC with his dad. And he's painting that plastic model. My wife and I just watched that episode the other day. That might have been, it might have been the pilot, I forget. But that was a pretty cool looking ship. And given that, it's canon because it was in an actual episode, I'm sure you could, in fact, there's a lot of ships from Star Trek that have yet to be made. And some of them only made one appearance, but they're still pretty cool. Did anybody ever make an Andorian cruiser? Because the thing Shran flew around it, because that was pretty cool. And I don't think the Tellarite ships would be too popular, but anyway.
Did anybody ever make a model of the TNG shuttle?
Yeah, they made runabouts. I think they made some models. Now you got some of these garage companies that make some of this stuff, resins and everything. And I think they did. It seems crap. You know what? Now I gotta know. Off to scale meets we go. Let's find out.
Somebody makes one?
I think so. Yamaguchi class lower shuttle bay. Okay, Ferengi shuttle. These look like a Starship Modeler and some of these smaller companies. AmaQuest makes one. Okay, the runabout. Yeah, there's a runabout made by... that's actually... Is that the Squadron Shop? Huh. Runabout shuttle title numbers. That's odd, doesn't... 144 Squadron, it must be some kind of resin thing. Okay, let's see. Alliance, Metlasits, Fleet Yards. Okay, Type 30. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of shuttlecraft. Most of them are made by these little garage companies, but there's a bunch of them out. I never even heard of Alliance before. Galileo is Polar Lights, of course. That's the new shuttlecraft I was saying with a full interior. Who the heck is Alliance? Jiminy, there's a lot of them. Wow. Okay. Federation Models makes one. Oh, they also made that weird ship that had one appearance, a Vulcan ship in the original movie. So yeah, they're not made by the major companies, but that's a pretty niche market, I'm sure. AMT is the only major name. All the Federation Models, I think, has a little bit of JT Graphs, S decals. AMT Ertl, AMT, Polar Lights.
Fast Sports wants you to read some of the comments.
Okay. 10 how much read the comments. Okay.
Somebody was asking about that shuttle in 2001. I think you gave me a model of that once. The nuclear powered one.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's from 2001. Yeah, the Pan Am one. Yeah, I think you still have it.
Somewhere. Who made that thing?
Crap, I should know that. Airfix, Aurora, and yeah, okay, that was an Aurora kit. And Airfix also made one. Let's see. No, I don't have an issue with resin, but I'm thinking about the big kit makers, the styrene kit makers. The resin guys, some of them do really good work, some of them don't. But I don't even know if these are actually resin. They could be injected styrene. Let's see.
I remember when they came out with that movie.
Hey, SRS prototyping actually made the original Matt Jeffries idea concept.
I think Pan Am at the time was selling tickets for the first shuttle ride on one of their aircraft into orbit.
Wow. Of course, that's just a gag. You know.
They're like $100.
Oh wow. Yeah, but they don't get to keep the money till they give you the flight. I wish it would say it does. It doesn't say what these are. I'm only guessing that some of them are. Well, I know some of them are resin because it's early type shuttle. Actually, I think that is made to be a shuttle for to go in the shuttle bay of a larger model of the big ship. But tell you what, if it wasn't for the resin kits, a lot of these wouldn't be around though, because that's when I talked to Alan Urey over at Fantastic Plastic, he was saying that they make the pattern, and the resin they get about 50 pulls out of, and then they have to make a new mold. But resin's so easy to work with in that regard, or inexpensive. If he was to cut actual steel molds for injection plastic, he'd never get his money back and he wouldn't be able to make all the stuff that he makes because it just wouldn't be affordable. I mean, $50,000, $100,000 to set up, $150,000 to set up a mold, and that's not happening.
You got to sell a lot of models to make up for that.
Yeah. Federation models. I don't know what these are. I've only built a few resin kits. Yeah, I've only built a few resin kits, and there's some of them are great. I mean, and some of it's just like I say, it's because all these manufacturers there isn't a fixed standard. It's although given how hard it is to make the pattern and make the molds, I imagine most of the folks that do it, really try to make as good a product as they can. But you got to use. I think you have to use CA glues on them, if I remember right. And I have a couple of resin kits, not many, but I actually have some that were sent to me that I haven't had a chance to get around to. Oh, that Typhoon was resin, and it came out looking really nice. Or Typhoon 2, the Eurofighter.
We had one of the founders of Horizon Hobby come and do a presentation at the Model Railroad Museum a month or so ago, and they were telling us what's involved in creating a mold for a train engine. And they don't use beryllium because they don't make that many of them, so they make the molds out of steel.
Okay.
They use hundreds, if not thousands, of tiny little some kind of electrostatic pieces that they use to put the rivets and the fine lines into the molds.
Detail is insane on those things.
Oh yeah, and they would use like 3 of these things just to put a set of rivets in, because they would wear out before they would get the rivet to where they wanted it to be.
Well, you got to give them credit for the attention to detail. I understand why these things are made in China, because it's the only place they can afford that level of labor anymore.
Oh yeah, it's very labor intensive. They showed how the model shells are actually painted. A person puts it into this, physically just picks up a model, sticks it on this jig, and then right there in front of her, it goes to one pad, puts one color on it, moves over.
I saw them do that. They use brass molds because the brass fits very snugly. He just wedges them in there, pass with the spray gun, off to the next one.
Well, they don't use a spray gun. Well, they may if they paint the entire body, the entire shell first. But when they put the decals on. Oh, the
decals! I was thinking of the paint. Okay.
Yeah, the details. Like the road number and any other special little features that are on it. That's all done by hand too. They just slide it onto the machine. It goes from station to station to station. Puts next color, next color, next color. And you're talking making maybe a few thousand of these things at the most. But you're also selling them for $250 plus and up.
Yeah, they ain't cheap.
Nope.
You got to make a lot of those things to keep the doors open.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guys are coming. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was just saying, in the model railroading community, if it's not accurate, it won't sell very well, especially to most of the
No,
modelers.
they are. I mean, model builders are often very picky about details, but model railroaders are in a league of their own.
Oh, yeah, very picky. They call them rivet counters. I guess they call them that in the regular model one.
John, how picky are the slot car guys? I mean, I figure they're not. Since they're racing them around the track, they want them to look right, but they can't be as bad as model railroad guys. I'm waiting for everything to loop back around because it takes about 12 seconds to get out there, and then they got a right to reply, and that takes a little while.
Yeah, we'll probably get flamed here in a few minutes saying, yeah, we care about details. Rivet counters extreme.
You should say,
yeah, those Rapido guys, their models are insanely good, and they're not, they're very competitively priced too. I've seen some of them; they're really good.
Well, the one of the things about, and this is the slot car guys, the railroad guys, their knowledge about the real world stuff, their knowledge about trains, their knowledge about race cars is encyclopedic. And well, you're one of them. I mean, you're down to what kind of couplers and everything else. Of course, you had family that worked for the railroads, and that helped.
Yeah, trust me, I am nowhere near as fanatical as a lot of the people that I know. Stuart will tell you that some of these people are incredibly detail oriented, and if it's not exactly right, they won't touch it. They won't buy it.
Well, I can call you about trains. I can call Scale Car Garage or Steve's Model Mania about cars. I'm kind of the airplane and tank guy. And I'm sure there's some ship go out. I can talk to Bruce, Mystic Modeler Ships, about ships, and I have a little bit of knowledge in each of the areas, but obviously, the military is my strong suit. But, and reading this book on the secret horsepower race of, the Western powers in World War II, it's almost hard to read because it is so informative, so much details. Last chapter I was reading, they were talking about how they would upgrade an engine and they'd come up with apparently in World War II, the oils, as they would start to break down, would actually have an acid effect on the bearings, the ball bearings. So they had to get the oil out, but oil being precious, they had to use as much as they could. So they had problems with the bearings burning out, and they finally came up. The Americans had a ball bearing that had 3 metals and a thicker hide, and was just what they needed. So they crammed those into the British airplanes. Well, it turned out that there was another problem that caused problems because the bearings needed to have a thicker skin on them to fit the Merlin properly, the Merlin 20 properly. And it's not even like Jenga. It's like pixie sticks. You can't touch anything without everything else falling apart. You're like, good God. These guys are figuring all this out with some pretty rudimentary instruments. Basically by tearing engines down. And you realize how smart these people really are, or were. Take a second to read a couple of comments real quick.
Kind of all over the place.
Ricky's the Gundam guy if you need him, and
teenager in sack. Is that what that's?
Yeah, teenager in sack. Yeah.
He said he rode Amtrak yesterday. How'd that go? Do you feel like modeling Amtrak now?
Well, if you watch Scale Car Garage, John does a lot of work detailing out these cars, and like the trains, they have to move. So it's a labor of love, but it's nice. It's nice to see that kind of attention to detail, and but the every time I watch these things, you just learn because as I always had an interest in cars, but since this channel started doing this stuff, it's been greatly magnified because I'm getting more involved with it and everything. And I could count all the cars I'd built on my fingers, and now I've got that many just on one shelf. And I had finally built my first Johan kit, and that lived up to its reputation. And
I was just gonna say that one of the things that I'm a serious modeler in a way, just a little bit more of a niche, I guess. That one of the cool things that appeals to me about model railroading is that it's a model that moves in very much the way that the real thing does, and that's a big appeal to me. That okay, models are you got a boatload of models sitting in your display cabinets, and most of them are gorgeous, and they're very enjoyable to look at. But to me, I like to take the model out and play with it. Just go through the air with airplanes.
Yeah, I did that with it. That's why I've covered the RC field with so much styrofoam, and no small amount of balsa wood. But go out to John's channel. Fast Sports, but it's scale. The show is Scale Car Garage, and look at some of the, because he does resin, and look at some of the pulls he's done. They're magnificent. I mean, resin, when it's done right, is a magnificent thing. He's got it down to a science, though. He's been doing it a while, and just beautiful work. And the boys at Mach 2 should take some lessons from him.
Somebody in Mike Deaver is making a comment about the model of the Russian warship Moskva.
Wait, I got that box art somewhere. Let me go find that. Keep talking.
And somebody else I read today in an article in the Ukrainian, I guess, government or something like that said, yeah, it's now a submarine.
Oh yeah, that's become the big joke. Let me see.
Model railroads can be operated. That's right. You can do things you can operate them just like the real thing, and you can get seriously into detail with it as well.
Let's see.
And then there's the people that build ships out of very thin balsa wood, and they mount BB guns on them, and they actually have sea battles with them, sink each other.
Yeah, like I said earlier, we never grow up. Oh, come on. Now I can't find it.
Oh. Michael Niven says Trumpeter may have a 1/700th Slava class cruiser.
Everybody and their brother sent me that thing, and now I can't find the picture.
Of what?
Of the Mosca, the new one, where it's underwater.
Put a snorkel on it.
Swimming lessons, Russian style.
Oh, you have somebody watching you from Japan.
Hello. Konnichiwa.
Cool.
I know 3 words of Japanese. Konnichiwa, sayonara, and hey. That's it.
Oh, that was hi.
Oh, okay.
Cool stuff.
The thing is I actually found Russian harder to learn than Japanese. I tried to learn a little Russian. That is a difficult language. Here, Arabic's a tough one too. Oh, it's after 9 o'clock. So
it is. People are getting tired.
Yeah, the wife won't feed me until I hang up the phone. I'm trying to use the phone.
Still got 129 people watching.
Oh, well, thank you, everybody. Well, guys, I'm going to let everybody run. I will keep the YouTube up here for a little while so you can talk amongst yourselves. By the way, guys, I do recommend if you're interested any interest in how resin is done, go out and watch John on the Fast Sports channel on Scale Car Garage. He does a lot of really truly world class resin work, and it's impressive. My experience with resin has been very hit and miss, but a lot of the stuff I used also were, some of them, like the ones Ricky sent me were the Wolfman. Those are really, I still have some of that stuff I need to get working on. Those are really nice, but I've also had some in the past that were just, but the thing is resin tends to, especially today, tends to be a reasonably reliable, you buy a plastic kit, you can expect a certain fit. That could be a t-shirt. But resin is it's the Wild West. But it's a great medium. Without it, we wouldn't have a lot of cool stuff that's out there. Companies like Anagram, Fantastic Plastic, Real Space, these others make a lot of stuff that no one else is going to touch because they're not going to sell enough of them. And a lot of really cool stuff out there. My hat's off to the resin makers and the resin builders. Well, guys, I'm going to let everybody run. I appreciate you coming in and spending your Saturday evening with me. And Ken, thanks for thanks for hanging out. I cannot say wingmanning.
It was fun. Maybe we should do this some more.
I think we can work that out. And guys, take care of yourselves. And as always, model on.
Model on, guys.
Mm-hmm.